Oh my God, here we are.
Yeah.
Everything's coming together. We got the new studio backgrounds. We just, I just got my haircut, and no, but this is actually quite urgent. I have to announce everything to something to the audience right now. It's actually an appeal to the audience. I need everyone right now to go look up the rapper Bazanji and tell me he's not the next Eminem. I just discovered this dude. I was watching, I believe it was an NFL highlight video on YouTube, and the background music for it was so hot. I was like, "What is this?" I Shazammed it, I think, and then I found it, and I put it on my phone. And I haven't, and today I just played it again for the first time, and I was like, "Oh my God!" And then I looked the guy up, and I went through like the first 5 tracks of his on Spotify, and I can't even believe it. Like, I swear to God, this guy is off the charts, and I think he's like the next thing. But
Was that licensed by the NFL or was that like a fan clip?
Bazanji. I think it was a fan clip, but like a really big one on YouTube. You know, the one that has like the ones that have like more than the NFL does, like in terms of viewers. Those, you know, I've just been dipping into the world of sports again lately, and yeah, I've noticed that sort of ecosystem. Kind of, there's an alt media within sports too, right? And it's ginormous. It's just that it's even bigger than for us, you know, the alt media in politics. I mean, there's guys who are making a lot of dough, I think, just doing YouTube, having YouTube channels in which they put together clips of, you know, NFL games and all of it. But we're watching Hard Knocks. That's the most fun you can ever have. You know what that is?
No.
If you're at all into sports at all, you will love Hard Knocks. Because it's been going for like 23 years. I've watched few of the seasons, but it's a reality documentary series that goes inside the training camp of an NFL team, and they do like up close and personal. You know, it's like a reality documentary, but of the team and of the players, and it's just you really see what goes on in the NFL. At least you see a lot of stuff that you don't see. That's for sure. The thing they don't do is the cameras never follow the players to the clubs, which is like one of the main things they do. We all know this, right? But they don't show that. At least I've never seen them.
You don't see the footage of them shooting themselves in the foot.
Right. And of course, you know, the women, we don't see that part of it either, which is, again, that's a huge part of being an NFL player, is the women. But yeah, no, they leave that out. But you do see a lot, and you get a lot of, and the first thing that jumps out at me about the NFL, watching it from the inside there, at least somewhat from the inside, is how truly militaristic it is. The way that they talk, the way that they move, the way that they make plans, the way that they relate to each other. The drama of the game is always as if they're at war. It's just different than in other sports. There's plenty of drama, plenty of caring about winning and losing in other sports, I know, but in football, especially at the NFL level, looking inside that locker room, the way they talk, it's really, you know, people have said for a long, long time that football was invented in America as a metaphor for war, in particular for the sons of the upper class, because football was very first played at elite boarding schools in the Northeast in the late 19th century, and especially at Franklin Roosevelt's boarding school, which I've taught a course on. Our course on the New Deal covers this. But yeah, and that's what Franklin Roosevelt did, and all the Roosevelts were really into playing football. They were also really into going out and conquering other places in the world, so it was perfect for them. But, you know, and you really see that thesis played out. I'm telling you, go watch Hard Knocks, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Or just, I'm sure that, yeah.
I was gonna say Joe Biden as well. He wore leather helmets back in the day.
Yeah. Which is showing now in his cognitive abilities now that he wore leather helmets back in the day. Yeah, man. It's I mean, it's not like it's all a bad thing. You know, I think you know, I want to have a military, at least, you know, as of now, to protect me. I think, you know, it's not like I'm against militaries in general. So I understand, and there's a need for that, for martial discipline, for sure, just to maintain society at all. I get it. To maintain security at any level. But it is also just remarkable that the NFL is at the center of our culture and is the most popular entertainment. in American culture and has been my entire life. I am exactly as old as the Super Bowl. I can always remember how old I am by looking what number the Super Bowl is this year. So I grew up exactly with the NFL, and it's the center of American culture, and it is a metaphor for war. And was really, actually, even more than that, was created in the late 19th century when America became an empire as a training sport for aspiring imperialists like Franklin and Teddy Roosevelt, who both wanted to conquer the world when they were teenagers and said so over and over again. And they played football and they said, this is great training to be a leader of men as we march across the globe, remaking the world in our image. So
well, just real quick, you brought up the NFL and all that, and the culture war behind the NFL has been a big story for I mean, forever now. But I'm just starting to realize now that the NFL got woke the exact same time the military got woke. And I think those two are tied together probably.
Damn. Right, man. Correct. Well, the NFL and the military have been tied at the hip for a couple decades at this point. I mean, I think especially in the last 10 years, it's just gotten absolutely obvious. You know, the wearing of the camouflage by the coaching staff on the sidelines during games. I guess that started about 10 years ago. You know, the military flyovers before games, like before the Super Bowl, that started like 20 years ago, but now it's become like a ubiquitous thing. And it happens not just at Super Bowls. It happens, I think, at most games or a lot of games. I just saw some regular season game, and I noticed the flyover of military jets beforehand. Jesus Christ. Do we have to get strafed every time we want to watch a game?
It's really cool live, though. If you went to a game live and you saw that happen, it's really cool.
You know what? Maybe I'm just a total like commie pacifist pussy, but I had one close encounter with a military jet, which I was standing on the beach in Savannah, Georgia one day, and there's a big air base near there, and just randomly, I don't know why, but some big, at least to me, jet like flew right over my head as it seemed to be landing. It was just, I don't know, it seemed like a couple 100 or 300 feet above my head. And it was just the violence of the noise and the vibrations were like so. This is one single military jet. It wasn't even like a major like C-130 or anything. I think it was a bomber, but I'm not positive. It wasn't a big one. It wasn't like a B-52 or anything like that. But that alone was just like, holy Christ! I really don't like war. It's hard for me. I mean, I'm also afraid of guns and always have been, and I just can't shake it, even though every libertarian friend of mine has like begged me to go into the woods and shoot guns with them. I still haven't done it. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, it's just, you know, again, pointing out what it means to live in the center of the global empire, of the hegemon. It means living in a militarized society, at least on some fundamental level. And you also see it in Hollywood. I mean, and there's more and more being written about this, by the way, about how the CIA has basically seized Hollywood, at least when Hollywood makes movies about war. The CIA dictates it. There's no such thing as an independent war movie anymore.
Well, the Pentagon, more particularly.
What's that?
The Pentagon, a little bit more particularly.
Both. I mean, yeah, I guess. The CIA hasn't had to deal with them in a long time because you're right. Because the relationship has been so direct and so willing, you know, between Hollywood, between the studios and the military itself. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't matter, but it's really astonishing. You cannot see an independent, meaning independent of the government, war movie anymore made by a studio. You can't. Apocalypse Now, that can't happen anymore. The Full Metal Jacket, that can't happen anymore. My favorite, in a way, the one with the biggest emotional punch to me, is actually Born on the 4th of July. Tom Cruise, the Ron Kovic story. My God, that tore me up. And you wouldn't ever see a movie like that. You can't in the studios. So that was like, I think that was in the 90s, the last one there. I think Born on the 4th of July it was in the 90s. So that's, is the last hurrah of independent thinking about war in our culture, in the formal culture, in the mainstream culture. There's no independent thinking anymore. Seymour Hersh used to work for the New York Times, like in the 70s, I think. He worked for the New York Times. He wrote articles exposing the war machine all the time for the New York Times, and he was celebrated for it, won Pulitzer Prizes for it. Now the New York Times won't even talk to him, much less publish his articles, and everybody denounces him as a conspiracy theorist kook. Like that alone, you know, the history of Seymour Hersh, his history, because he started in the 60s, and he's been doing exposés of the government constantly since my entire lifetime. And as I said, he was really a hero, not just of like hardcore lefties back in the day, but even regular liberals. Like I said, he worked for the New York Times and won the Pulitzer Prize. Those are liberals giving him prizes. And now, as I said, he is treated the way like Max Blumenthal's treated, or Aaron Mate is treated, as total pariah. To the end, he can't get published anywhere, so he has a Substack. Because Seymour Hersh can't get published in any outlet, so he has a Substack. Something has changed in the mainstream establishment culture. I mean, it's certainly, the New York Times was still establishment, of course, in the 70s and 60s, and was pro-war, pro-Vietnam, pro all the wars and all the things, and, you know, always pro-government and never questioned the basic narrative and all that. But they did allow, I guess, I'm just trying to suss out exactly what the difference is between American formal culture during my childhood and it now. It really, and I've often tried to check myself. Is it just me who's changed? Because I have changed. I've changed radically since then in my politics and my thinking. Or have they changed? And, you know, this is a debate like the intellectual dark web has had for a long time. That's kind of how they started, you know, the Weinsteins and Sam Harris's and Jordan Peterson's were like, wait, the media in general and sort of the Democratic Party have changed. Like they're gone crazy. Like they used to be me, and now they've gone crazy. And I was like, Democratic Party has always been the party of war, the party of the American empire. It is responsible for every major war except for Iraq, and you could even argue it was responsible for that too. But no, I think that there was absolutely more toleration of dissent before Trump. That's it. I do think, and certainly in the 70s and 80s, like I said, you know, Francis Ford Coppola could have Apocalypse Now, one of the most searing critiques of the Vietnam War you'll ever see, made by a major studio, and Seymour Hersh, you know, working for the New York Times. That's unthinkable now. And I mean, now every single national security analyst on MSNBC and CNN, this is no exaggeration, is a former general or CIA analyst. I mean, and they say so. Like they're totally upfront about it. Every single one of them. There's not one single person on CNN or MSNBC who's anti-war. Like not one person who's even skeptical of any of the wars. It's phenomenal. So something has changed, and I think it's mostly Trump, but I think it started even before Trump. And that's the history that needs to be written. I need to see the moments when the liberal establishment decided to start closing up the First Amendment, you know, and start going for censorship. Because they, you know, liberals, as well known, were generally the ones who were they were the free speech warriors, you know. I mean, that's where you went. You went to the ACLU, liberals. That was all liberals, and they were true. They were real deal, like true free speech absolutists, the ACLU, until now. But that was a liberal organization with some left-wing tinges to it. But it was basically a Democratic Party organization. Everybody there was registered with the Democrats. Yeah, I don't know. I think you wouldn't know because you never lived there in that world when there was such a thing as liberalism.
Well, I mean, I grew up in the cultural milieu of post 90s where Noam Chomsky was cool, Rage Against the Machine was cool, and you know, we were anti-Bush because that was anti-war to be anti-Iraq war, and so what was it? The NAFTA trade deals,
99.
Like, yeah,
Seattle.
The protests around that and the discourse around that sounds exactly like populism under Donald Trump.
Or what about Occupy Wall Street and Tea Party?
Yeah, Occupy Wall Street was a great free speech thing happening. Like that was
08.
Yeah. 2011.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
And then, yeah, so again, Obama kind of ruined everything, but like his first term, it was still feasible that these were still the cool guys before he sort of turned pretty hard in his second term.
Wait a second. Let me get this straight. Occupy was 2011.
Yeah.
That was, I know it was mid Obama.
Mm-hmm.
It was fully during Obama. Was the Tea Party at the same time or was it earlier?
It was earlier, but also during.
Was it?
It was like 09.
For some reason, I have 2008 in my mind for those, but I'm wrong. Well, what was
Tea Party? I believe would have been after Obama was in office.
Because it was largely in reaction to Obama?
Yeah.
Because they were all racists.
Because, yeah, that's the only reason. Yeah. It's not like something happened in 2008 with the economy that isolated Middle America.
Oh, no, it was in response to that. It was in response to the TARP. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was TARP, very specifically, which, what was it, drafted by Bush and then signed by Obama? Mm-hmm. I think is what TARP was, something like that. Right. So that would make it 2009, actually, Tea Party. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyway, yeah, so you grew up with that, which was, yeah, right.
Oh, and by the way, I make this point all the time, but Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street had pretty much the same populist economic critiques of the system, but because the media painted Occupy as a bunch of commie hippies and they painted Tea Party as a bunch of racist rednecks, there was a cultural war divide that never got them on the same page.
Right. Occupy became the Bernie movement, mm-hmm. and the Tea Party largely constituted the Trump MAGA movement. Yeah. Right. I mean, those are the two lineages there.
Andrew Breitbart and then Steve Bannon.
It really was. I mean, those really were the origins of the dissident world that you and I inhabit.
Yeah.
The podcasting world, the alternative podcasting world, all springs out of those two things.
Yeah, Tim Pool first made his name live streaming the Occupy protests. That's some of his best work.
Right. Yeah. And so that's exactly who you see, basically, the descendants of Occupy and the Tea Party on my podcast, Joe Rogan's podcast, all the IDW guys. That's who they did. That's where it began. It's interesting. And so that's when you think about this historically, which not many people have, the origin of this dissident movement, that is both left and right. It's on the left and the right. You can see it has a left-wing origin with Occupy, and a right-wing origin with Tea Party, but both of which at the time, as you're saying, and this is so crucial, at the time, they looked almost identical. They were both responses to the economic crisis and the bailouts. Both of them, that was the right-wing response to the bailouts and the left-wing response to the bailouts, and which were similar. And it looked like, I remember then thinking and writing about this. I wrote about this for a reason a couple times, actually. And that, damn, we're on the verge of a true left-right alliance, or even maybe a merger. You could see the Occupy guys, people, and the Tea Party people maybe coming together and forming a party, some sort of populist maybe party, you would call it. They were that close. You're totally right. And now look at them. I mean, there is some merging, like with Icarus Festival people, like with my podcast, like with Rogan to some extent. But I'm thinking like the Gray Zone in particular. Those guys, they're absolutely Bernie types. They're absolutely, Occupy left-wing socialist types. But Glenn Greenwald, yeah. Right. But they're all, Michael Tracy, they're all very happy to work with people who are descended from the Tea Party in some way or another. Yeah. I mean, so there are some, and that's exactly the work that we do politically. That's what Icarus is about kind of bringing that coalition together and like putting it up literally on stage and saying, look, this can be done. We can reach across these differences and form coalitions to oppose things we not only, mutually dislike, but that are extremely important. I mean, the coalitions we're talking about are on issues like war and peace. and, state surveillance, the power of the federal government to incarcerate citizens or kill citizens or spy on citizens. I mean, it's not fringe issues. These are truly the life and death issues, the big ones. And that's been my political mission for about 20 years, to bring together like the good parts of the right as I see it, which I would call like the classical conservative and libertarian elements of the right, with the dissident sort of socialist, anti-liberal, anti-democratic party left, who are fierce critics of the state, who generally have a sort of an anarchistic, I would say, attitude toward the state. And I'd say that's true for the Gray Zone guys and for Glenn Greenwald. You never hear them like talking about the need for welfare and the government should be doing this and should be providing that. They probably believe in those things, but that's not what they spend their time talking about. They spend all their time talking about how the state is murderous and deceitful and totalitarian and prying and all those things. And so therefore, yeah, anyway, that the coalitions have, that coalition, I firmly believed we stopped Obama from bombing Syria. I know that in my heart. We had huge protests immediately when he started talking about doing that.
I got shut down in a week. Yeah.
Every major city. I was in LA. I went to every protest in LA. Just in LA, we had thousands of people on the street, like in the middle of LA. New York was bigger. SF was even bigger. Every city had that, like, for days and days. And we sustained it too. We stayed in the streets for days and days and days. And there was a big media push. I wrote a thing for Mediaite at the time, which was just sort of taking off, which got a little traction. But I mean, it was like in the mainstream, they were like noticing that there was huge opposition. And then we had good intellectual opposition, as I recall. I think some decent commentators and like journalists sort of came out against it, but it was mostly the streets. And Obama pulled back. He didn't do it. I mean, I'm sure of that. And that was absolutely left wing and right wing, especially like that was a libertarian, left wing, libertarian socialist alliance right there. Stopped Syria from being bombed, at least in that moment. I mean, we didn't stop much else from happening in Syria, those poor people. But that's what I've been trying to do.
Talking about the lines shifting, when Trump ended up bombing Syria after Assad allegedly, and now we know he didn't bomb his own people with chemical weapons.
I mean, just so you know, I mean, the official position is that he absolutely did. The UN says this over and over again. The UK, the US governments are adamant that Assad did the chemical attacks.
Didn't the UN have that council, the UN, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, this is Aaron Mate's whole bailiwick, but as far as I know, yes, there is the agency that oversees such things. It's super complicated, but basically, I think Aaron is arguing that I believe the agency that oversees such things does say that Assad did it, but that Aaron shows that it was corrupted, that agency was corrupted. But I mean, I certainly know this, that the UK, US governments, NATO, all have always been adamant. I just saw a thing just recently, like the UK ambassador to the UN, I think just a couple days ago, brought it up again and said yet another, an example of a horrific atrocity committed by the Assad government against its own people. I have done some of the deep dive on this. I did it like several years ago. I did spend like a better part of a day looking into what Aaron was arguing. And from that, I can't say I got definitive, but it sure looked like he was on the right track. And it does look to me, if I put it this way, if I had to bet all my money on one or the other, to absolutely bet it was on the rebels, not on Assad.
Yeah. The UN inspector investigation thing that pretty much proved that it
plus
was.
The motivation makes no sense. Makes no sense. Of course, it would be used as a pretext for the US to go in harder against Assad.
Just like Obama did in 2013.
Why would he do that? I mean, it's just idiotic. Just same with all the things they say about Putin all the time. All these things that do nothing but hurt him, that he would have no reason to do at all. But anyway, yeah. So,
but anyways, in 2018, 2019, when that was happening and Trump was bombing Syria, and CNN and MSNBC were praising Trump for the first time, saying that he looked presidential for dropping those bombs and how beautiful those bombs were.
Brian
Alex
Williams.
Jones was crying on air when that happened.
Literally crying?
Literally crying, saying, "We've lost the plot. Trump is compromised."
Wow.
And I believe in my heart that Tucker Carlson is the reason why we didn't fully invade Syria, because he talked very slowly into the camera and said how dumb it would be to invade Syria in a language that a 3-year-old can understand.
You know what's amazing? It is still, I believe, possible, I think, that Alex Jones is right about everything. Because I don't think he's actually been refuted totally on anything. Even the Sandy Hook stuff, he didn't really make an argument.
He didn't make any assertions, really.
He made a couple of like wisecracks almost. You know, he was just kind of he was kind of joking almost about it. He didn't make any argument. But the things he's made arguments about, I don't think he's been fully even the damn gay frogs thing, right? Had some basis to it, didn't it? Turns out.
Yeah, totally.
The thing is that he gets made fun of for. Yeah, but if that means, that would mean that the world is run by a ring of satanic pedophiles. And that's where I just have a hard time going. Like, but I'm open to it. I just want to see more evidence.
Yeah. Well, on the satanic side, I mean, like the Illuminati literally means enlightened ones. They are Luciferians.
Yeah. And do they run the world?
I mean,
uh-oh. There goes the audience.
Every American president ever has been in some organization like that. Remember the "Don't Tase Me, Bro" guy who got tased at the John Kerry event in like 2005 or whatever?
Yeah.
His question was, "Is it not true, Senator Kerry, that you were a member of Skull and Bones, the same organization as your opponent, George Bush?"
Were you a member of Skull?
Yeah. That's a great question.
That's the special lobotomizing taser too, by the way. Yeah, for some reason he had no memory of anything when he woke up.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, dude. I just simply have not seen nearly enough evidence on that.
Okay.
Generally speaking, you've got some stuff from the Bohemian Grove that Alex Jones unearthed. Yes. There is a whole book
real quick, where he pretended to be a member of the Bush family and snuck into a ritual where they burned a baby in effigy.
I know. Now, I will say, you know what? I will say, though, it's not 100% clear that's exactly what happened there, because there's no corroborating evidence and the video is extremely grainy and distant. But it looks like it might be something like that. Yes, there's something very fucking weird going on. I'll say that much. Yeah, that might be satanic. I will absolutely say that. There is an entire book written by an academic about the history of the relationship, the very close relationships between many members of the British political elite and the occult. This is a scholarly book written by a professor in the UK. This is well documented. Okay, so we know that. I have not seen much evidence at all of American politicians doing that. I understand all the Freemasons going back in the day, but that well into the 20th century, that was everybody. And the Freemasons, there were black Freemasons, there were actually quite a few black Freemason clubs around, lodges, but it meant very little. It was simply like a gentleman's club. It was an elite sorting mechanism, largely, right? It's the way that we screened out for our elites.
Well,
the Freemasons. That's how that's what it was for black Freemasons.
The Freemasons lodge at your local town is a bunch of old guys barbecuing and hiring strippers.
Now, yeah.
Yeah, now. What goes on at Yale, though, is probably a little bit more intense.
Well, right. These are people who are, again, vying for positions at the top of our society. But they did that before, that's why they go to Yale. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. They're not selected by secret organizations. These are people who have the ambition and the talent and the desire to rule. Which is, thankfully very few people, but yeah, and that's so those people go to Yale, especially or the law school in particular. My son's thinking about law school, and we've talked about Yale, and it's just like, I think that the Yale Law School, I really do think that it operates primarily as a feeder for Democratic Party politics. Like, that's what it is. But why would the occultists be liberals? That makes no sense to me. Why would they be leftists or liberals? Why would Satanists be liberals? Because we have agreed that socialism and even progressivism are simply secular Christianity. Like,
I don't think secular Christianity, secular being the main word.
Christianity without the mysticism.
Yeah, but I think humans are incorrigibly religious, to borrow Kamasi Washington's phrasing about Africans.
Okay.
And in a secular society,
Kamasi Hill,
yeah, sorry.
Kamasi Washington is
not the sax player, yeah, Kamasi Hill. My bad. Yeah, incorrigibly religious, and in a nation of liberal secular elites who pretend to be Christian to appeal to middle America, I think what you get is a version of Christianity that is more mystical, and that, well, not even that, but I think you're drawn to mysticism and the occult, and progressivism itself is like Luciferian. It's the light. It's light bringing. It's technology. It's Promethean.
Why would leftists be pedophiles? That completely escapes me.
It's not about leftists. It's about the powerful. How do you know you're powerful? You do the one thing that is the most shunned thing in society. You do it to demonstrate your power and that you can get away with anything.
I see. Okay. Yeah. But that would, I assume that would apply to, there have been many conservative and right-wing elites, powerful elites too. Would it apply to them as well?
I think so, yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I wonder if QAnon thinks so.
Uh-huh.
I don't think so. I think QAnon believes it's only leftists, meaning their political opponents, meaning I think they're looking for reasons for ways to demonize their political opponents, which is what the left does.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But I think QAnon is a psyop operated by the FBI. But
oh, right. Oh boy. Okay. Well, we should start playing some videos now. Let's go to the news.
We got a super chat from Fuego de Bacero down at Rumble. He said that the original Tea Party came out of the Ron Paul movement in 2008. There was a Tea Party money bomb event. It was quickly hijacked. We call them Teocons and bailed on it.
Yeah, we await the release of all the documents from the FBI's work and Homeland Security's work in and around and maybe within the Tea Party and Occupy movements. There's no question there were FBI assets and probably DHS assets and or undercover agents on the ground inside those movements, probably from the beginning. But certainly after a first day or two of the protests, I'm sure they were infiltrating. And Lord knows, we have, the J6 revelations about the FBI's very, very, very extensive involvement in the J6 violence. Should be, God, I just hate the left so much.
I think Fuego is talking more so about Conservatism Inc., where you have people who nominally pretend to be on the Trump side, for example, or on whatever movement is rising on the right populist side, but really they just want to funnel people into mainstream republicanism.
Oh, I see. I see. Like it's a co-optation move.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. He wasn't talking about the state.
Yeah, I'm certain there were agents like that involved, but
oh yeah,
I think more so that yeah.
Well, like Ted Cruz was a Tea Party guy, right?
Yeah.
There's a good example.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ted Cruz has his moments still. He still says a few good things here and there, but he's clearly establishment to the guilt, to the hilt, and to the guilt too. Meaning gold. He gets paid because of it. So, and he retains his position as a senator from the great state of Texas, too. I don't know how actually Ted Cruz gets votes. It's remarkable. But anyway, yeah. So sure. I mean, the Republican Party, I'm trying to remember the history of this, but the GOP absolutely did everything it could to co-opt the Tea Party. And in fact, there was a Tea Party caucus. In fact, doesn't it still exist? I think it's sort of no longer really Tea Party-ish, but there was a Tea Party caucus in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. I mean, in a way, and they were not, I guess Ron Paul was a member of it, wasn't he?
Well, the Freedom Caucus. I don't think he was a member of the Tea Party caucus when that was a thing. I don't think so.
I'm trying to remember the history of that.
But early Tea Party definitely had its roots in the Ron Paul movement, I think.
Oh, no, for sure.
Yeah.
Or no, well, just Ron Paul was a part of it. That's all.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. And a lot of the Tea Party was Ron Paul's politics,
mm-hmm.
which is what was so good about it from my perspective, and God, I mean, that moment, that converted more people, more young people in particular, to a particular kind of politics than anything else. It was just amazing. Every day it seems like I meet somebody who was transformed by that. But the co-optation by the Republican Party, I mean, there's only so much they can do, right? How do they exactly co-opt people? How would the party, make some rebellious congressperson abide by their rules? I mean, look what happened to AOC. The entire left has thrown her overboard now because they consider her to be completely a captive.
Yeah, she voted entirely in line with Nancy Pelosi
of the DNC. Yeah, captive of the DNC. The votes on Ukraine, I think, were the final straw for a lot of people. All the squad has voted 100% consistently with the Democratic leadership for Ukraine. It's like, well, what exactly are you now? I mean, that's the most important issue of the day. And if you're going to vote with them on that down the line, no go. Co-optation. Now, how did that happen? How did AOC get co-opted by the DNC? I don't think she did get co-opted. I think she changed her mind.
Well, yeah, I don't think she was ever that bright to begin with.
I do.
Okay.
I think she's I think she's really talented.
I think she's talented. I don't think she's bright from a policy perspective. I think she's talented at social media, but I don't think she's sophisticated on policy.
I think she's as talented as any congressperson on those issues. I think she's good. I mean, you can compare her, just watch her speak compared to Ilhan Omar and especially Rashida Tlaib.
Mm-hmm.
They're boneheads, especially Tlaib. She's an absolute bonehead. No, AOC is quite smart. I mean, I would say she's like a very good student. That's the vibe I get from her in terms of her intelligence. She's a very good college student. She's like your best college student kind of thing. She's not going to be original. That's the problem.
Okay,
she's too ideological.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're that ideological and you're just looking for whatever the correct answer is, and so you can spout it, you're not ever going to hone your intellectual chops. You're never going to have to like really take in competing arguments and take them seriously. And so that's the problem. That's the atrophy that sets in when you become an activist.
And I mean, like wokeism. She's like, I want to stop using that word woke, but it's
I know.
getting tired.
Well, identity politics.
Identity politics. Her play on identity politics and how egocentric she is about everything.
Oh, well, that's funny, right?
Yeah.
The narcissism is just really hilarious with her. Mm-hmm. But since she's all about being a selfless woman of the people, mm-hmm. that's what's so funny. But it's just all about how cute she is. Actually.
Yeah, and how. Yeah, and how about January 6th was all about trying to kidnap her and do unspeakable things to her while she was
right. Over. Kidnap and gang rape her.
Yeah,
I can almost guarantee not one of those guys would want to do that or could do that. I mean, from what I've seen,
drove her first off, and
they killed this guy. Which Utah, 80 years old.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of oppressed MAGA people, he threatened to kill Joe Biden. And he's 80 years old and 5'3", 300 pounds or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Short and very fat, obese. And they stormed his house at 6 a.m. and shot him to death. Hey, who knows what happened, right? I mean, I gotta say in this case, my guess is he did something very, very self-destructive when they showed up. I mean, does anyone think he didn't have a rifle next to his bed?
Yeah, I believe it's confirmed that he wasn't firing.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I believe it's confirmed there was no shots fired from him.
Confirmed, really?
Yeah, I need to
Yep.
get my
The
source on
FBI confirmed that?
The FBI didn't confirm that, but like, I
Who
don't think there's
confirmed it?
any. Yeah, let me check my source on that.
How
But
could anybody, how could that be confirmed? There's the FBI and there's a dead man.
yeah,
The only people who would know.
but like, let's say there's no bullet holes that look like they exited a window, for example, or exited a door from a certain way, or there's no like, there's no spent rounds around him. Like, there's evidence like that could, yeah.
But can we think about this for a second, though? I mean, of course, I'm sympathetic to those who are outraged by that. I'm basically on the same side here, I think. But come on, in some cases, people do really crazy shit that gets them shot by the cops. And by the way, the people who are outraged about this are recently, especially, often talking about how cops get a bad name. In fact, a whole lot of libertarians have been talking a lot about how cops get a bad name. This guy, from what we know about him, is exactly the kind of person who would have a big ass rifle right next to his bed. And if they kick down his door, seems like the kind of guy, a don't tread on me kind of guy. No, I mean, that's exactly the kind of guy he seems like. He lives in Utah too. I mean, it is a thing there, sort of an anti-government, anti-authoritarian, populist, and all about guns kind of thing. I could easily see him shooting back. I don't know. Or shooting first. Totally. I mean, does this not comport with what you would think would happen here? I mean,
No, I think it's possible, but
okay. It's similar to like all the Black Panthers who killed cops, like Mumia Abu-Jamal. And the left has just ever since then, been outraged that the state took action against them. And of course, they always deny that they killed the cops. When the Black Panther, Mumia Abu-Jamal, this is the greatest conceit ever. Mumia Abu-Jamal was a member of a Black Panther split off at the time that was explicitly calling for the murder of police officers in Philadelphia, where he lived. So it's the same thing. Like, of course he killed the cop in that case. And I'm not saying, of course, this guy shot at the cops, but I would say this is the kind of person who would. I mean, no. Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised that this is the type of person who, if he heard a knock on his door at 6 a.m, and
also, why on earth would the FBI want to execute this guy? What does it do for them?
Oh, I don't think they particularly wanted to execute him. I think that this is just a poor police practice of going and raiding a house at 6 a.m. as opposed to.
That's not what my right-wing friends on Twitter are saying. They're all, of course, they're all saying he was executed because he had the wrong views. That's stupid. That's what the left wing says all the time. Mm-hmm. Same thing, same kind of thing, right? About their own people getting smashed by the state. No, if you're gonna be a revolutionary, guys, guess what? Like, the state's gonna try to kill you. Okay, like in some way or another, or incarcerate you, or do something. Ask any revolutionary from around the world. This is what happens to them. I mean, hello. And it's this hilarious thing where these like people with, and it's only in America too, because everywhere else in the world understands this. American revolutionaries, like my parents, people who are actually committed to a real revolution, when the state comes and like finds out about them and like puts them in jail, there's like this there's just complete outrage. Look at the atrocities committed by the state, putting revolutionaries in jail. It's sworn enemies, or killing them in the streets. The sworn enemies of this. How dare the state take violent action against its sworn enemies, people who call for its overthrow? It goes both ways for the left and the right. There are revolutionaries on the left and the right. This guy was basically a revolutionary of the right. This is what happens. I'm often sympathetic to them. I'm often kind of on their side. I'm always against the state, but hello, if you're going to go against the state, you're going to get hurt by the state. That's the way it works. And the state kind of, in a sort of very broad moral sense, I suppose, doesn't it have a right to self-defense? I mean, if you're saying I'm going to overthrow you, doesn't the state have a right to like defend itself against that? Like, what do you think it's supposed to do? Lie back and just say, go ahead, slaughter our ruling class, take over.
No, I understand that making specific threats towards agents of the state, which his Facebook posts could be legally construed as a very specific threat against a very specific person.
Yeah.
That he could practically do.
Yeah.
I understand that's something that the state would want to squash, period.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, I think the execution part of this is like, why don't you arrest him while he's at work? You know, why don't you arrest him when he's out and about? Why do you have to scream at his door at 6:15 in the morning and force a violent confrontation? Sort of like no-knock raids in the drug world. Like,
here I am defending police practices. Because isn't there, I don't know, I haven't looked at this, but I'll bet you anything he talked a lot about guns and his guns. And there had to be evidence that he had guns, and a lot of them. And he probably was bragging about using guns. So, and he's probably strapped at all times. So if I'm going to bring this guy in, I'm going in when he's in bed. Not when he's at work, when he's got at least a sidearm on. Right? I mean, dude's talking about killing the president. Okay? If he's serious at all, and I take it he was serious, but he really did hate Joe Biden.
It's funny. I'm reading an article from Desert News about an eyewitness who watched this event, and the parallels you're drawing to police shootings on the Black Lives Matter side is pretty funny. There's all these gentle giant narratives about him that he wouldn't hurt a fly.
Exactly. Yeah. He's the right wing Mike Brown.
Yeah.
The right wing Trayvon Martin. Total thugs. Yeah, who went after Mike Brown, absolutely, we know this, went after the cop's gun, and Trayvon was beating the shit out of George Zimmerman, smashing his head into the concrete when he got shot. Yeah, no, they were not gentle giants, nor I don't see any reason to think this guy. I'm just saying from the cop's point of view, okay? If I were a cop on that case, on that arrest, I'd have to, I would have said, let's go at 6 a.m. Sounds right. And let's go in hard. Because the guy is talking about killing the president. Why wouldn't he take a shot at a police officer?
Man.
Come on.
He weighed 300 pounds and was unable to walk without a cane. He would drive to church despite it only being 200 yards from his home because he had trouble moving around.
Bang, bang. An obese person can shoot just as well as anybody else can.
Yeah. I don't think a middle America guy is going to immediately just start shooting at cops in broad daylight if he gets arrested, and if you walk up to him and say, "Are you this, sir?" and that you politely read him his arrest.
It's like all these anarchists from the turn of the 20th century, Alexander Berkman, Emma Goldman, all these people, who all of them took shots at presidents and kings in various ways. I mean, literal shots, tried to kill a bunch of them, were successful a couple of times, and then they got deported. And to this day, it's like, oh, what an absolute travesty of justice. What an atrocity. The United States deported these people who tried to kill their leaders. And they were immigrants too, by the way. Like, what is this? Of course they're going to do that. And I love Emma Goldman. And, I hate the presidents they tried to kill. But what do you think is going to happen? This is not good politics either. It doesn't build movements. It doesn't create anything. It doesn't generate any forward movement with your political movement. It just causes a reaction by the state, and your people and you are going to go to prison or you're going to be dead. And this has been played. Unless you have a mass movement, that's what's going to happen to your little revolution. So long as your revolution is little, your chances of succeeding are very little, and your chances of facing state violence are outstanding. So grow up and do real politics. And the only way to do real politics is to try to build a mass movement. And the only way to do that is through communicating, talking.
Oh, man. We talk about the JFK assassination a lot, and then the Lincoln assassination lingers in people's minds. But the William McKinley assassination is one of the most interesting out of the three. Like,
why?
Oh, just an anarchist killing him, and then how that kind of led to Teddy Roosevelt being elected. And so like the whole progressive era kind of hinged on that moment.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say that, but I mean, a lot did sort of pivot around his assassination for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. McKinley, for me is most important as the originator of the American overseas empire. He was the first to take the empire overseas to Cuba and the Philippines. And that was one of the main reasons the anarchists went after him. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, I think it was the main reason.
But look at how effective that is from an anarchist position, right? Like you kill the president successfully, and then who replaces him?
Oh yeah, an even more effective, tool of the capitalist class.
Yeah,
absolutely, and murderous capitalist class too. I can't believe people who are fans of Teddy Roosevelt. You know who did not kill John F. Kennedy? Not anarchists. And you know who else? You know who else did not kill JFK? The CIA did not kill JFK. Elements within the CIA might have. In fact, I think that's probably true. Certain rogue agents, yeah, but the CIA, no. This book, I just read this whole book, and I strongly recommend it if you have any questions about why the CIA why on earth the CIA would kill John F. Kennedy. Read this book and you'll know that they had no reason to kill him. He was on the same page as them in regards to everything important, in terms, especially Vietnam. So the main argument that Oliver Stone was sort of initiated, he was the first person to make the argument, the sustained argument that gained traction, that the CIA killed Kennedy because Kennedy was going to pull out of Vietnam. That's what Oliver Stone says in that stupid ass movie, and that's what he said ever since. And then there's been this whole industry, and I got to say, almost everyone on the dissident side, both left and right, that I know believes this, that the CIA killed Kennedy because he was going to withdraw from Vietnam. You read this book, The Kennedy Withdrawal, by Mark Silverstone. And this guy's a total establishment historian. In fact, I think he's worked for like the Kennedy archives before. He's a Kennedy liberal kind of guy. He makes it very clear that Kennedy did not at all intend to withdraw from Vietnam unless the United States won the war. Like, he was only once it was very clear the United States would achieve its objectives was he willing to withdraw forces from Vietnam. But read this book. It's very, very clear. This whole idea that the head of the CIA, the heads of the CIA as an agency was responsible for killing Kennedy is absurd. Absurd. In fact, the head of the CIA took an actually more conservative approach to Vietnam than John F. Kennedy did. I mean, John McCone was the CIA chief. So no, please get this out of your fucking heads, people. My dissident friends, I love you to pieces, but you're just wrong about this. Some of the smartest people who do political analysis, who have major podcasts, believe this firmly. And now RFK Jr. is reviving it. He talks all the time about how the CIA killed my uncle and my father. I haven't done the work on his dad, although as far as I know, it was Sirhan Sirhan. And the reason why Sirhan Sirhan did it, he was a Palestinian, and RFK came out in support of arming Israel, giving major weapons to Israel to fight the Palestinians with. Again, it always comes back to empire, domestic politics. You can always trace it to empire. It's unreal. But no, the CIA did not kill John F. Kennedy, people.
Well, again, the forensics all point, though, to elements of the CIA.
Elements.
Yeah.
No. I mean, we had Larry Hancock teach our course on the JFK assassination. And by the way, if you want, to one place to see this argument laid out, go there. Not the argument I'm making now, but the argument that elements within the CIA did it. Go to the the JFK assassination course at Unregistered Academy. Larry Hancock lays it out absolutely beautifully. I think, it's not 100%, and he admits this. It's not airtight. He doesn't have a smoking gun, but he presents a whole lot of evidence to suggest strongly that it was several agents working in the Miami field station who had been a part of the Bay of Pigs operation, who were furious at Kennedy for refusing to call in air support for the Bay of Pig commandos. That's why. But not the CIA as an agency, not the leadership of the CIA, none of that. No.
I broke our policy of not watching movies that we discuss, and I finally caved and saw Oppenheimer.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, I was going to say there's a scene in there that would drive you absolutely furious.
Oh God.
Where they note that because the drama of it, I don't want to give too much away, is Strauss, this guy being appointed to a cabinet position and his hearing on it, and he's kind of painted as a villain at some point, but they're like the one senator who opposed him on the Democrat side was a young JFK. And there's murmurings as you leave the theater, so that's why they killed him. Because of a
JFK, who ran on a platform of building up the US nuclear arsenal faster than Eisenhower was, who then, when he became president, did in fact increase the number of nuclear missiles in the US arsenal. Like, he was one of the most fierce Cold warriors in the US Congress. This dude was a hawk, an imperialist to the bone, and he carried it out. There were 300 advisors in Vietnam when he took office. When he left, there were 15,000. He's the one who sent attack helicopters, those infamous helicopters that terrorized the Vietnamese people for 10 years. JFK sent those helicopters. He was the first to send combat helicopters to Vietnam. That was him. He basically invented the Green Berets, special forces, to fight in jungles so that they could fight in Vietnam. Like, what are you talking about? Guy was from an anti-war, anti-imperialist perspective, he was the worst. Certainly one of the worst. And he was all about pursuing the Vietnam War. He wanted to continue fighting the Vietnam War until the communists were defeated in the field. This is totally clear.
But it's just funny how he, to this day, persists in popular consciousness as this guy who's always going against the grain on everything, and who's
maverick, a rebel.
Yeah, rebel.
Yeah, total rebel. Please. I mean, it's just, I could go on with civil rights. I mean, there's the Kennedy brothers were dragged into supporting the civil rights movement. And you know why? Is, again, because they were being embarrassed in Africa when they were competing with the Soviet Union. And this kind of is a good segue into the Niger story. When they were competing with the Soviet Union over controlling the post-independence African nations, right? You have pictures on the newspaper, in the newspapers and on TV in Africa of like these white cops, you know, with dogs chewing up black children in the streets. You know, it's like, oh, Soviet Union came along. As I see, you want to come with us because we're the anti-racists. You don't want to align yourselves with the United States, do you? They're racist. And this is why the Kennedys, and there's a whole book written about this. Mary Dudziak, who's a historian. This is why they supported Martin Luther King. They were opposed to King. They were absolutely, and J. Edgar Hoover, all the while, as we all know, was keeping files on Martin Luther King and accusing him of being a communist subversive, which is not entirely untrue either, by the way. But my point is that the Kennedy administration was anti-King, anti-civil rights movement. And the only reason they supported it is because they wanted to look good to Black Africans in their competition with the Soviet Union. Man, cynical motherfuckers. And I wrote a whole book basically about Bobby Kennedy Sr. in his attacks on the labor movement. That's my book on Jimmy Hoffa. He spent years trying to dismantle the labor movement and going after organized crime in various ways that were unconstitutional, unethical, and authoritarian, and destroyed the labor movement. So it's just, the Kennedys suck. And Bobby Jr. now, by the way, everybody should go look at Max Blumenthal having it out with Bobby Kennedy over Israel. Bobby Jr. is just spouting absolute right-wing Israeli Likudnik propaganda about the history of Israel, Palestinians, all of it. And I'm not saying that Max is right about everything, but it's very clear that Kennedy is doing this. He's completely establishment in very core ways that people are not understanding. But this debate's kind of going on the Jimmy Dore show, so people can check it out there. First, Kennedy came on, and Jimmy didn't know what to say. He doesn't know much about Israel, so he let Kennedy kind of steamroll him with all these things he was saying about Israel and Palestine. And then Max came on the Jimmy Dore show a few days later to correct everything. But anyway, yeah, I mean, the Kennedy family was always pro-Israel, as I said. Bobby's father, that's why he was killed. That's why he was killed. He came out strongly in support of arming Israel. This was in France, 1967. France stopped arming Israel, and it was that year where the United States started sending weapons and fighter jets to Israel. And Bobby Kennedy was the leader of that movement in the Congress. He pushed for that hard, and this is why Sirhan, who was a Palestinian refugee, whose family was not allowed to return to Israel because of the establishment of Israel, this is what Sirhan said was the reason he shot Bobby Kennedy to death in Los Angeles in the Roosevelt Hotel in '68. So for his son to be saying all this stuff about Israel and Palestine is quite rich and interesting.
I went down an RFK rabbit hole a long time ago, and I need to look back into that assassination. But I think the forensics, again, point to some foul play, maybe multiple shooters.
Well, who was it? Oh, Sam Husseini said to me, because I brought this up, and Sam was like, Sirhan didn't do it, right? And I was like, what? He said, yeah, I forget what the argument is, but if it's Sam, I'm going to take it seriously. I haven't looked into it yet. I do want to say one thing about this, though. If it's true that Sirhan was at all responsible, it's a very important event in understanding, especially the war on terror and on Islam. Because if it's at all true that Sirhan had anything to do with this, and for the motivations he said, it's 1968. That was the very first act of Arab Muslim terrorism against an American ever. Of course, the United States and Arab Muslims had existed for centuries. Before then, before 1968, America and Muslims in who were Arab had existed for centuries, but Arabs had never attacked us until 1968, and it was for a political reason, and it was for supporting Israel, for what we were doing in the Middle East. Blowback. That was the first blowback, was the killing of Bobby Kennedy. I believe, I'll see if maybe it's not true. Maybe Sirhan was put up to it. I mean, we know he pulled the trigger, right?
Well, I think we know he was caught in the room with a gun in his hand. That doesn't mean that he shot Kennedy in the chest from the front.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I got to look into it.
Yeah. Again, this was the same thing with the JFK thing. I think you're motivated by politics first, as opposed to some of these nerds who just look at newspaper scrappings and autopsy pictures and try to figure out what could have happened. And then they put sloppy politics on top of the holes they find.
Yeah. Let's talk about Africa.
Okay.
And by the way, this is just another segue here from the Kennedys. That was one of JFK's signal achievements, was the creation of the Peace Corps. Now, what's the Peace Corps? I bet many people listening and watching right now, and who will watch it later, will know exactly what the Peace Corps was. But many people think, oh, it's a thing where you volunteer to go help poor people in third world countries. You go build huts for them and teach in their schools and help with their irrigation projects and, dig ditches for them and just help them, provide health care to them. That's what the Peace Corps was designed by JFK explicitly as a tool in the war with the Soviet Union. It was a tool by which to win what was called the hearts and minds of the people of the developing world. We go over there and we better their conditions with our volunteers, our young idealistic volunteers straight out of college, and they will join with us. They will align with us against the Soviet Union. And that's what it's about. It's always worked directly with the CIA, then later with the National Endowment for Democracy, and the State Department. Always. They've always been as one, working in these countries together. So yeah, I mean, it is a good thing to go build mud huts in Togo, as one of my friends who did the Peace Corps did once. Sure. Why? I mean, it's good that those people have mud huts now. That's great. But you're doing it for a very particular reason, which is not altruistic. It is about expanding and maintaining and strengthening the American global empire.
Which is funny because they often, co-opt these young hippie anti-war college students who just want to take vacation.
Often left wing. I mean, I've known many Peace Corps volunteers, who are all lefties. Yep, totally. JFK's signal achievement was assimilating the anti-war left into working for the American empire. Genius work.
To this day.
Genius work. Yeah, well done. Seriously, hats off to the Kennedys. That's true. That's what they've accomplished. Still to this day, they're talking about JFK as an anti-war president. Like, I can't even make my head explodes when I see very smart people saying that. So Africa. Right, the Peace Corps has been very active in Africa ever since JFK. Still there today and doing its work against Russia. So the Sahel region of Africa, which is the region just south of the Sahara, running from the Atlantic to the Red Sea, that whole band of Africa, which encompasses 10 countries. This is everybody's focused on this now. So we talked about Sudan a couple weeks ago, and a very similar thing. Basically, what's happening is there's another competition between Russia and the United States over control of Africa. And now China's another player as well. But at the moment, it's directly a competition between who's going to control Africa, in particular, the Sahel countries. Will it be Russia, evil Russia, or good, virtuous America? So in Niger, former French colony, which had this neo-colonial relationship with France until 2 weeks ago, in which, there are many tentacles connecting them, but in which France ended up getting about most of its uranium, or I think 30% of France's uranium that they use in their nuclear power plants comes from Niger in exchange for some cash payments that keeps Niger poor. That's how that's worked. And, I don't know the history of it, and I'm sure there's all sorts of complications, but that's the bottom line, at least in the minds of the people of Niger who have led this coup that happened recently, which overthrew this pro-Western, pro-France government, civilian, democratically elected, in quotes, government. And this coup was led by the military, which is not about France, and has announced it will no longer cooperate with France and no longer give uranium to France. And so good luck powering your nuclear power plants, France. And get this, Michael. So Niger is the number one supplier of uranium in the world. The number 2 and 3 are Russia and Kazakhstan. So France, if you want to have nuclear power, and some huge percentage of France's power comes from nuclear, they can't get it anymore because they're not going to get it from Russia, right? For obvious reasons, or Kazakhstan. So this, the French economy is on the brink right now. And this is why Macron is actually talking about sending in bombers and bombing this coup, the military in Niger. Meanwhile, the United States of America, guess what? Who knew this? There's 1,100 troops stationed there as we speak. What? They've been there for years. What? In fact, I think 4 of them died in an ambush a few years ago. And when Congress was notified of this, they didn't even know we had troops in Niger. Several major members of Congress, even on the Foreign Relations Committee, were like, wait, what? Our troops got killed in this country? I didn't even know we were in that country. That was Niger, I think. Pretty sure that's right. So what the U.S. is doing is claiming, and by the way, there's zero evidence for this, that the Wagner Group, Russia's mercenary army, was in Niger trying to seize control. And the Nigerian military, which now controls the government, has been making very positive noises about Russia and expressing an interest in doing business with Russia for good reason. So Victoria Nuland just went there, just took a visit to Niger, and no one knows what was said in this meeting, but it was described by Nuland or by the State Department as frank and difficult. And so what most people assume is that Victoria Nuland said, listen, if you do any business with Russia, you're in a lot of trouble with us. And the military of Niger said, go fuck yourself. And she was there for a total of 3 hours.
The headlines that are being passed around is this quote that was given to the AP, Associated Press, that if there's any military intervention at all in Niger, the junta is going to kill Bazoum.
Yeah. And then also, and so then the other very important piece of this is the Sahel region generally and the other countries there. And that's why I brought up the Sahel when we started talking about this. So 2 or 3 of the countries, especially Nigeria and Senegal, are making, well, actually just today, I think it was just a few hours ago, I take it back, the ECOWAS, which is the military alliance of the Sahel countries, they, I think, just announced today, just a few hours ago, that they are forming a military response force to intervene in Niger. And they have their own reasons. They're not just working for the West, I don't think. They just want regional power, as far as I know. But that would upset the whole global politics of this too. Other countries that neighbor Niger are saying the opposite, that they're going to defend Niger against the encroachments of the West and possibly the encroachments of Nigeria and Senegal. Nigeria has the biggest military in that region, and apparently Senegal has a very good military. So that's a serious force in West Africa to deal with. Then you have Algeria, which shares a large border with Niger to the north, another former French colony, which is saying, you know what, we're not going to intervene against France on the side of the Nigerian military, but we are sure going to mess things up for you. They've made threats that if France comes in and tries to intervene, or the US or the UK, that they're going to cause trouble on that border. So, and then you've got China owning tremendous amounts of land resources in and around Niger. Niger, as I said, is the leading supplier of uranium for nuclear power plants in the world at exactly the time when many of the environmentalist groups are actually saying we should go nuclear, and many governments are now putting nuclear power plants online, or at least making plans for it. Like, nuclear is really back big. Right now, everybody wants uranium. So Niger has a lot of power here. They also are a major supplier of gold too, at a time when people are looking for hard currency. So hard assets, I mean. So the stakes are really high, and you have Russia and the United States and China all vying for something there, power there. You have regional conflict at the same time overlapping that. So, it could be a tinderbox, or maybe it will all be resolved. But there's a lot happening there that is certainly full of friction and has a lot at stake. And you have many, many different militaries and several different governments, many of whom are hostile to each other, who are basically now participating in a geopolitical struggle. The Ukraine war is related to this, of course, at the same time, because the belligerents in this thing are the major belligerents in that thing. So yeah, but the neocons, Vicky Nuland, the State Department, they are letting it be known to Niger that they need to not leave the orbit of the United States and the West. They need to stay with us. We will continue to take care of you. Do what Macron says. And Macron, again, is making noises about sending in bombers, which is really something else. So there you have it.
Yeah. It's funny. I've heard about this meeting. Like, how are they spinning it? How are they spinning it on the neocon side or on the establishment side? Like, how this meeting went?
I don't think there's been any comment except that it was frank and difficult.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I've seen a lot of commentary on this meeting, and there's nothing. I don't think there's anything further from the State Department about it.
Yeah.
But she is now. By the way, Vicky Nuland was promoted, so she's now number 2 in the State Department, but behind Tony Blinken. It's now the 2 of them are running everything. And Jake Sullivan. It's those 3 who run pretty much the whole foreign policy show. Not good.
Yeah, the only substantial quote from her about how it went is, "We had a frank exchange about the situation here."
And I think difficult was used too. Was that word used?
I'm not hearing that from her, but I'm not surprised. Yeah.
I think the official State Department statement said that.
Okay.
But anyway.
That's funny.
All right. let's
Oh
see.
yeah,
Yeah.
difficult talks. I'm seeing that quote now. Yeah, difficult.
Yes.
That's funny.
Frank and difficult. Hilarious.
Yeah.
She's like, I mean, she's the world's most hated woman because she does. It's not like any American like likes her. Like Americans just don't know about her, but everybody who knows about her hates her.
Mhm.
Right? If you bother to know who she is, you are the type of person who will hate her. I mean, but they persist. These neocons, they're so hated. The people who are on their side don't even care about them, so they don't get love from anybody, right? But then everybody who knows who they are and knows what they do hate their guts, but they still go on decade after decade after decade, plugging away. They lose war after war after war, get hundreds of thousands of people killed, and they just keep going with no shame and no regret and no slowing down. And they've got Victoria Nuland right there running a damn war for them. Wow. Robert Kagan's wife.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about this. We kind of touched on it before, but how unpopular the political class is, especially the octogenarian and above political class. I'm going to play a clip real quick of Mitch McConnell giving a speech in Kentucky, and he's being drowned out by a chance to retire.
It's hard, yeah. Retire. They made 3 syllables out of it in Kentucky fashion. Speaking of just going on and on and on as if one were a zombie. Yeah, look at just the way he is there. I mean, can you imagine just continuing giving your speech without even flinching? Completely blank expression. I would never, ever. I would just walk off the stage. Lindsey Graham did the same thing recently. That was even more brutal. They were just booing the shit out of him at some Trump rally thing. And he finished his speech, but at least he sort of acknowledged what was going on and like laughed it off a little bit, made a couple cracks about it. But Mitch is just reading the script. He's just going, Senate, I'm just going to go. And he's been in there for how long? 40 years, 50 years? How long has Mitch been in Congress? I don't know.
Yeah.
But
and then Dianne Feinstein this week is 90, and she ceded the power of attorney to her 30-year-old daughter. Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean a lot. That happens quite a bit with people of wealth when they get older.
That's a significant marker, though. I mean, just she's 90 regardless.
Well, it doesn't matter. We know she's incompetent. I mean, we know that. She can't do the job. She's totally out of it. And God, what? And you know why? Have we talked about this? You know why she's hanging on? There's a reason.
Maybe.
Again, and guess what it has to do with? I swear to God. It always does. I swear to God. We might have talked about this a few weeks ago. The reason she's hanging on, most likely, is that if she retires, Gavin Newsom will have to replace her, the governor of California. And right now, Barbara Lee, who is my congressperson from Berkeley and Oakland, she's running for Senate. And so and she's a black woman. And so it would be Gavin would basically have huge pressure on him to appoint her to replace Feinstein. But Barbara Lee is arguably the most anti-war member of Congress, or at least has been. She was the only member of Congress to vote against the Afghanistan war, and she consistently voted against the Iraq war. So that's why she's unacceptable. Now, she has been bad on Ukraine, I have to say. I'm sorry to say. Even Barbara has been voting for Ukraine. But she's just too radical on foreign policy. The establishment is not okay with that. She's for them, she's untrustworthy on foreign policy. So that's why Dianne is hanging on.
Yeah.
By her fingernails to keep Barbara Lee, an anti-war voice, potentially anti-war voice, out of the Senate. Man.
The question is, these people are so unpopular, so rankedly unpopular. They have like a 95% disapproval rating, I think Congress on the whole does.
Yeah.
So how do they keep getting reelected for decades?
Well, okay. I mean,
and does that grant them legitimacy that they keep getting reelected?
So one of the great things about the internet is that we have discovered, especially from social media, the advent of social media, just how ignorant and uninterested in politics the vast majority of Americans are. So it's very clear. And this is also from surveys. We just know, I mean, most Americans don't read the news. They don't even read the headlines. They don't watch CNN. They don't, nothing. They don't know. They don't care. They don't even know who the vice president about 40% of the time. It's incredible. I mean, they don't know where Washington, D.C. is on the map. Literally, there have been studies of this. And we know that you know this from the people in your life, right? The people you actually see and talk to every day, right? They don't care about any of this stuff on any level. The vast majority of more than 50% of Americans just simply will never care.
Well,
And
real quick, that's what I was saying about AOC is that like not a lot of people like her on policy necessarily or are sophisticated enough to get her policy arguments. But a lot of people really like her because she goes live on Instagram and talks about politics while she's cooking and seems like a smart person they could hang out with for fun.
Yeah, if you can charm people for non-political things,
yeah,
then you can win office. And she's example of that. If you do the opposite of that, then you'll have Trump's experience. You'll receive hatred. But yeah, I mean, no, my point is that this sort of buttresses Curtis Yarvin's general argument and what she got from James Burnham in the Managerial Revolution, which is that, the vast majority of people are just completely uninterested in who governs them and never will be interested in, never have been interested in. And therefore the elites are generally left to their own devices and self-sustaining, self-perpetuating. And it's a very small class of people who constitute the elites, and they are generally unchallenged by the populace because the populace is generally indifferent to anything regarding who governs them, or how they're governed. And that's what happens. I mean, most people in California. I mean, I grew up here. Dianne Feinstein was the mayor of San Francisco when I was a child, and anyway, like, I mean, in my milieu in Berkeley, among all these political radicals, yeah, we knew all about Dianne Feinstein. Sure, we knew exactly not to vote for her. But the rest of Californians, no, they don't know. They don't care. They're never going to care. So that's how she keeps getting elected and reelected.
Cool. Yeah. And for anarchists like us, democracy doesn't equal legitimacy. So,
well, yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly. Who does she represent? Like, yeah. I've lived here I've lived here beginning in 1965. Does she represent me? Nope. Not even slightly.
So we've been tiptoeing around Hollywood, but this has been going on forever. We should probably talk about the writer's strike while we're.
Yeah, let's do this. I want to talk about it. I want to say something publicly about this. I haven't said anything. So the writer's strike, the SAG-AFTRA strike in Hollywood, they're fighting for two basic things. One is residuals. Fine. No problem with that. For streaming services. Totally got. They're generally not getting any residual pay for streaming shows that they're on or part of, which that's just basic. I mean, it's basically like royalties. Of course they deserve royalties like any other industry. But the other thing that's like, I think of equal importance to them is they're opposed to the use of AI in entertainment. And they say, and this is a quote, "We're going to stop it."
Well, specifically on AI, I mean, the writers are concerned about AI being used to replace their job. But
yeah, I know.
Also, the actors, you might have more sympathy for this. Although I'm not sure if either of us believe in intellectual property, but using AI technology to use somebody's likeness and to get that likeness to say whatever they want them to say and to be plugged into TV shows ad infinitum in perpetuity without receiving any residuals for it is a big concern.
Okay, but to me, that's a residual issue. That's not. I mean, they're opposed to the technology as a whole.
Yeah,
they're not. They want rules written in contracts with all the studios, barring the use of AI by any of its creators. Like this is good old labor Luddism. That's what this is. the Luddite movement of the 19th century, very famous, right, anti-technology movement in England, was led by workers, right, who didn't want to be replaced by new technology. Same thing. And this is ever since then, labor has fought, against this or that technology that has eliminated these horrible jobs, or jobs that were simply redundant. Like, I mean, there are all sorts of technology that basically made coal mining obsolete, at least in this country, right? They developed all sorts of new technologies that can do coal mining that don't require men to go underground. The mine workers union opposed that violently. Like, they wanted to keep these horrible jobs. Steel workers, same thing, all these. So with the writers in this case, if a machine can replace you, then don't you think you should write better than a machine before you demand that you get paid for it? I mean, what's the ethical calculus here? I mean, just amazing to me. But the thing about AI, and I think we've said this on the show, but I'll say it again, I am now quite convinced that it is no threat to truly creative people. That it's going to replace all the writers and artists and creators who say things that have been replicated before. That's how AI picks it up in the data. If it hasn't been stated or written or expressed before, it cannot know that, cannot create it. Only we can create things like that. A brand new art form that's never been expressed before. Of course, that can only come from a human mind. So I think it's going to replace lots and lots of people who do basically very replicable, almost you could say cliched work in terms of writing and art. Yeah, you're going to be out of a business if your job is like writing for some like corporate blog, for sure, right? Because that's something that many writers can do. And if AI can do that, what loss is that to humanity? I'd rather you be spending your time trying to be creative rather than just writing this rote stuff that a machine can copy. So I don't think it's any threat to human creativity or ingenuity or anything like that. I think it's just going to actually free up a lot of labor time for people to do better stuff with their lives than creating art that's not really art, is my point. I don't think AI is a threat to real art at all.
Mm-hmm.
At all. Does that make sense? Do you feel like way?
Well, yeah. Also, I consume art because I want the perspective of the human being that created it. Like, I value the persona of the person who created it, and I'm not interested in random dribble that was pooped out by a computer unless I know the people who built the computer or something like that. But like the story, like the person themselves and where they came from and their unique perspective on the world is what I'm trying to get at. So,
but what if you can't tell the difference between music created by AI, an AI machine, mm-hmm. and your favorite Afro-Cuban percussionist?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, live music solves this. I'm more of in my music consumption habits, I'm a return to folklore guy.
But if I'm saying, if the recorded track sound, you couldn't tell the difference. You couldn't tell which was created by your favorite musicians and which was created by a computer. You could not tell. Would you still listen to the one that was created by people?
I would seek out.
And why?
Again, I would seek out the AI stuff just as a curiosity thing, but I don't know. If it makes me want to dance, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
I mean, I grew up with the drum machine controversy.
Yeah.
Where everybody was like, "Oh my God, the drum machines are gonna destroy rhythm and creativity," and that's sort of true in hip hop actually lately. Although it's not because of the drum machines; it's because of hip hop. But
my problem with it is the quantization with drum machines, and that everything's set to a click. Yeah. And that because of that, nobody knows how to manipulate tempo and build energy throughout a song anymore.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say nobody, but that's a lot. I mean, it is a declining art, I would say. Yeah.
Like the Rolling Stones were like one of the last stadium groups that didn't use a click track that would let it flow and swing.
I think Led Zeppelin sort of had that like flowing tempo. To me, it sort of feels flowing, like ebbing, and it comes in, Mm-hmm. Not inconsistent necessarily, but just like there's like a heaving feel to it, to the tempo, the rhythm. Anyway,
Oh, there was a study that drummers who swayed more with their time in specific ways.
Sway, yeah.
Yeah, were more fun to play with
Hell
than
yeah.
than the
That's
ones that
me.
were robots.
That's me. I sway a lot when I play. And my bandmates would always be looking back at me like, speed the fuck up, slow the fuck down. All right, man. So we're gonna go to Unregistered Live, where we hang out after Unreported with patrons of the show. If you want to join us, go to patreon.com/unregistered right there. See that URL? Click on that, and then go to Patreon, and the link, the Zoom link for our hangout, which begins now, Unregistered Live, will be right there. Join us. Michael and I are there every Thursday after Unreported, and it's one of the benefits you get from being a patron of this show. So awesome, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll see you over there.
Oh, the one thing I wanted to say about the SAG thing is that I just
Yes,
hope
sir.
that I have an accelerationist position on this.
Yeah.
And I hope it burns Hollywood to the ground. That's all.
Right. Oh, no, that's what we all want. I mean, Hollywood needs to go. The whole thing, kit and caboodle, burn to the ground.
Cool.
All right. On that lovely note, peace.
Peace.